end, and we have sound at the other end. We just have to make the two ends meet. Welcome everybody. It's Tuesday, March 8th, 2016. Therefore, it's the Keshe Plasma Reactor night, and my name's Rick Crammond, and once again we'll meet and discuss Keshe things here on the Reactor group. And today's topic that's been requested by Robert is about water, and specifically the fourth state of water. Ooh, so liquid, gas, and solid. What is the fourth state of water? And why is it that some scientists with very long credentials claim that this is true? And so we'll get into that a bit, and we're even going to try to do some modeling of the effect. Okay, Robert, do you got anything lined up there, or how would you like to begin?
I could start sharing screen, but
Okay.
still nothing too
Okay,
weird
great, thank you.
so far. Just starting, and just my question is this only affects water having this fourth state, or other liquids possibly could have the fourth state, similar to water, like maybe oils or maybe, I don't know, air? Does it
Okay,
only?
first, what do you call the fourth state of water? What does that mean to you? You've done some research on this, obviously, and are interested in it. And some people may have heard about that, but probably not everyone. And so, how would you describe what is this fourth state of water?
Well, I've only watched a couple of videos very recently, and from what I understand, it's uh, at the at the surface layer of some object. From what I understood, it could be any object, but specifically they had some sort of a gel, alcohol-based gel or something. I don't remember exactly, but at the surface of that object, the water molecules organize themselves into more of a semi-crystalline structure. It was more like jelly-like, so in between liquid and crystal type of structure, where it repelled any impurities away from that um, layer of that semi-crystalline structure. So any you could take seawater, and within that boundary layer, the water would be purified from the salts and anything else that was in the seawater. I mean, you could have a sort of clear distilled water in that boundary area. And that was looked as one way to desalinate water. That was just one of the effects. Um, Also, it has charge associated with it. I think it was negatively charged. And with the rest of the liquid of the water being positively charged, it created a battery effect. So you could draw some voltage off of it. It wasn't much, but you could put them in series, parallel, and amplified. The other effect was you could create motion due to that charge effect, I think. They had a little tiny tube that they submerged in the liquid, and a flow started and was maintained through that little hollow tube um, without any exterior power input. And the explanation was that the energy for the motion was coming from the environment as infrared, mostly in the infrared bandwidth.
Yeah, that's what I understand from the brief readings of it, and so this is a strange idea, and I wonder if it's associated to capillary action, as far as there must be some correlations there. Um, we know that water, when it's in a very narrow tube,
Yeah.
will tend to pull itself up the tube.
That's due to the surface tension, right?
Right,
Capillary action. But
but
they were explaining the surface tension on top of the water being due to this fourth state of water.
mm-hmm,
So the capillary action seems to be the result of maybe this fourth state of.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, is it true that if water comes up against any surface, then it forms this type of substance?
It seemed like that it worked at the surface, the boundary layer of any surface.
Now, it does mention the key ingredient in this one website. It doesn't show the article, but it has sort of a brief summary, and it just mentions that the key ingredient to create this highly structured water is light, i.e., electromagnetic energy, whether in the form of visible light or infrared wavelengths, which we're surrounded by all the time. That's an interesting idea. So, would this surface have to be a clear surface that is wouldn't necessarily be as infrared as in all surfaces, doesn't have to be clear that way. It seems like anything that was in the any cup, let's say, that was in the regular realm of temperatures would still exude infrared rays and therefore would create the structured water inside it.
Uh, yeah, the I think I read somewhere that the effect starts below 54 degrees Fahrenheit, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So so in order to be between liquid and ice, it has to be closer. I guess the closer it is to the ice temperature, the more pronounced the effect may be. Perhaps I'm not sure, but it's sort of temperature dependent.
Oh, I see. Hmm.
And also ice water. In one of those videos, it was saying ice water, when the like glacier ice, when it melts, it is in this between going from the ice into the liquid state. It would go through this phase. So if you get water from the ice or from the glacier, you would be getting this structured water. And people who live in these glacier areas where they use that water, they were supposed to be more healthier. And within our body, this structured water actually was saying that within our body, all the water is in this structured state. It's not the regular H2O water in a glass, it's in this structured form. And the uh, in that form, it is an H3O2 rather than H2O. So it's a different composition. of hydrogen and oxygen. It's a different structure, geometry. And that comes due to this hexagonal structuring of it, where when you calculate how many oxygens and hydrogens you get as a repeating pattern, you get an H3O2 rather than H2O. So it's not the regular water that we are used to in our everyday practices. And uh,
Yeah, it's basically missing a proton there, in the sense that two H2Os would be H4O2, but this is H3O2, so it's missing a hydrogen.
yeah, it says more oxygen. It's sort of a oxide of water. It says
Right,
uh,
yes,
more oxygen.
that's a good way to put it. It's the
It's a nano water, maybe.
nano water, and yeah, nano of water. So once you have the nano of water, how would you create the GANs of water? It seems like
Well,
having it between, maybe having it between a copper and zinc plate, copper oxide and zinc plate, would convert it into the GANs. I wonder. What if our plates were so close together that it could only be structured water in between them?
yeah. I mean,
We could
it's
have zinc, copper,
proximity.
zinc, copper, zinc, copper, and repeat with very. What was the wall thickness? It was a few
Uh,
microns or no, it was a couple of millimeters, I think, wasn't it?
Depending on the infrared light presence, that layer would grow. Under
Okay.
sunlight, you would grow larger. If you remove the light source, you would shrink, become thinner. So I guess as it takes in this electromagnetic energy, it uses that energy to structure itself. It's sort of like a negative entropy phenomenon.
And
Instead
also,
of
so there'd be an energy flow between the two states as well.
Yeah,
So it'd be a loose proton there, an H plus spinning around somewhere that should be able to be utilized to make energy. So in a way, this is like a solar cell. It sounds like it could store the light and heat of the sun and in structured water, and then release it back when needed, something like that.
yeah.
Hmm.
Well, it had that battery effect where within the that fourth state of water, it was negatively charged, and outside of it, it was positively charged. So you could draw electricity that way and just put it under the sun and just have potential difference across it. But I don't know, compared to a regular solar cell, the efficiency may not be as high, but you could have larger surface areas of this, and at more economical, cheaper, create the power you need. And it was saying that the fluid flow within the plants was also due to this effect. Well, basically, the capillary effect then would be due to that effect also.
Yeah, I'm wondering what percent is due to the so-called capillary effect and what is due to this other fourth state of matter effect. And they also claim that this fourth state of matter is what's inside our body, so it sounds more like GANs than water in that sense.
Well, in a way, what is GANs? If you think about it, if it's these monatomic elements within water, it's like a colloidal solution. And he was saying the colloidal solution is also this within this fourth state of matter. So the GANs could be is just a colloidal solution of that element. So is the effects that we're seeing from the GANs, is it due to the water component of it, or is it due to the element uh, portion of it, or is it due to the combination of the two?
Wouldn't it be
That's
funny
what I'm
that
interested to
if it's
see.
not the GANs, it's actually the water? The GANs transforms the water into this fourth state of water and makes it all the miraculous things happen.
Mm-hmm.
That would be funny. And of course, most of the time we throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say, in terms of we're usually getting rid of the water. I mean, we use the GANs water and so on in various experiments, but generally people are dumping a lot of water out in the
Yeah.
sense of, straining off the top part of the water to try to get at the GANs. But maybe it's the water that's the important part.
Yeah, we're throwing away the structured water.
Mm-hmm. That we could be using somehow. How could we use it? Like if you had some water that has some structured water in it, would it? It's an intermediate state, so does it refer back to regular water when it doesn't have that surface to interface with? I wonder.
Yeah, a lot of things to wonder about.
I guess with enough research, one could find out this interesting phenomenon. What's his name? Gerald Pollack wrote the
Yeah.
book Fourth Phase of Water. He has lots of credentials too. One person says he calls it the most informative, eye-opening, mind-blowing book that I ever recall reading. This is a guy from Virginia Tech, the dean there. So that's pretty amazing. Now, um, so what's the difference between easy water and that's just the name that he called it, basically, eh?
Yeah, EZ stands for exclusion zone. And so he calls that zone where this effect takes place. It's exclusion zone because when he was doing the test, he had some microspheres in it, and this zone would push those spheres out. So it sort of excluded that zone from any contaminants, any uh, like any salts and things like that. So that will be pushed out of that zone, and you would just have clean H2O, just hydrogen and oxygen composition in that zone. So it's like a filter. Uh, it's a battery. It has structure to it. The interesting thing was that when he said it has this hexagonal structuring, the next layer overlapped it. Let me see if I can see how that's gonna work. And that overlapping is kind of interesting because I'm thinking that in three-dimensional space, it creates vector equilibriums, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, could I get you to adjust your microphone a bit? We're getting some popping coming through. It's a bit too close, I think.
How's this?
No, we're getting breathing happening there.
So
Just back a little bit, I think would be best.
Okay.
Okay, that seems good. Can we put this into 3D, or is that as a more or less a 2D structure, or one with very little, a few atoms thick, basically? This gives a good effect too, though. You can see some interesting patterns there, for example.
So I think, let's say the blue was the one layer, and then the red was the layer above it. As I understand it, it's sort of offset. The hexagons are offset from the first layer. So then it creates this three-dimensional structure, which I'm trying to visualize what it would look like if it was hexagons.
Well, you can see that putting the red in suddenly makes a stair step, kind of a stair step thing of squares here, or cubes rather. It gives it a three-dimensional look, even just putting that layer on.
So whatever it does, it creates the three-dimensional matrix, and maybe all the effects are related due to that three-dimensional structure, which is sort of crystalline. It's like a liquid crystal. So if crystals have certain properties, then this liquid crystal layer has similar properties as well. So what we're doing with our GANs is maybe we're creating these liquid crystals. So being a semi sort of liquid crystalline thing, it should have certain maybe resonant frequency, certain absorption frequencies. So it could absorb energy in certain frequencies, and we could harness those energies within our coils and stuff.
And how do you see the connection between the GANs and the structured water again there? That little leap in logic, you might say.
Being structured, these corners, as I understand, would be where the oxygen atoms would be, and the hydrogens would be in between them, I think, if I remember it correctly. They weren't showing the hydrogen ones because they said they're like in between the oxygens. So if you introduce another element into it, then it may not be this exact structure. It might change it, but it would still be a sort of crystalline structure, similar to like metals. When you have your stainless steel or the other composite alloys, you have different elements in there that give it a certain crystalline structure and thereby dictates the properties of that alloy. So in the case of the liquid crystal, the elements of the GANs would give it a different structure, and it would sort of become an alloy of the water.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like a colloidal solution, but if that colloidal solution, we think of it as a liquid crystal, it sort of becomes like an alloy of the water.
So, do you think that this structured water forms around each of the GANs particles?
Yeah, I would think that each of the GANs particle would be a surface from which these layers would grow from. So in between the elements of the GANs material, you would have this the layers of the structured water in between those. So the reason they would stay in a suspended state, initially the GANs water, all the particles are suspended, and then over time they settle down. I'm wondering, during that initial portion, you have them suspended in this liquid crystal water. And then I don't know, over time, if they settle down, then maybe this liquid crystal, because it has that filtering effect, maybe it just pushes the GANs particles down, and what you end up with is this liquid crystal floating on top of the GANs particles that condense on the bottom. I don't know, just thinking out loud. I I don't know how sodium hydroxide plays into it, because it was saying that the viscosity of this fourth state of water was 10% higher, and so was something else that was 10% different than from regular water. It was the
It's probably
viscosity.
the amount of energy it can hold, or it could be. Because I know it can hold additional energy. So if we had like, I'll just see if I can draw in here. There we go. If we had an image of a cup, for example.
You want me to stop sharing?
No, I'm just annotating.
Okay.
I'm just
Okay.
annotating on your
All right,
thing
great.
here, and I'm just thinking if we had water inside of a cup, does this easy water form on the surface between the air and the water, and also between the cup surface and the water?
Well, the surface tension was explained to be due to that, that state of water, because it was saying you could hold a the bugs that walk on it and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
they were able to explain that due to the surface tension of water, and certain surface tension of water was due to this effect. So I think then this effect would be occurring between any transition of matter. So between air and water, maybe you could have that between the surface of the container and the water. So it's like a boundary layer. If that's the case, then maybe air also has similar state, maybe at the boundary layer of other objects. Because I mean, in a pipe, in the airflow in a pipe, or on a car's surface, the velocity of the air at the surface is zero.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that the air right at the surface is not moving. And it has a gradient from the surface where the speed of the air increases.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on right at the surface of the material? Maybe it's a similar effect, right, with the air also. So air being a liquid also, it
Well,
could have.
air also having water vapor in it, something like up to 20% or so of the, definitely 3 to 5%, I think, is water vapor.
Yeah.
So would that water vapor form easy water vapor at the interface of where, against the surface?
Yeah, and he was saying the clouds, within the clouds, you have the same effect.
Mm-hmm.
The it was very interesting how many natural effects were explained with this process. So
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read the book, which sounds like very interesting. I should get my hands on a copy and read it.
I was wondering if anybody else here has some input on water in this realm. Check out the live stream here and see if there's any comments.
No, you were mentioning that it's infrared that causes, rather, it's a contributing factor to this effect of water. We just had a solar eclipse this morning, so I was wondering how that might possibly affect, what kind of effect that might possibly have on this phenomenon.
Well, one thing that's just mentioned in the live stream chat is John says he was reading about this yesterday, and he says, "Is that why some of my GANS water wicks up some of my plastic containers, but the overflow is oily?" Well, I'd suggest it's that it's probably more of the oily amino acids at the top of the water that tends to form, that might be that oily part. But perhaps it is the easy water, as it's known as, that allows that wicking, for perhaps. He
Yep,
says it would make a short bridge.
I've seen that happening actually with my own GANS containers, where the not just the amino acids, but the water and the salt in the water wicks up the wires. and where I twist the wires together, which is significantly higher than the rest of the container in the setup, it forms balls over there of salt and oily salt. That's a very interesting phenomenon. I mean, I know that oil has a propensity to wick up wires, if especially if they have a sheathing on them, and this would provide a conducive environment for the capillary action to happen. But I found it very interesting nonetheless.
I did an experiment with, you say you have a cup like this, and if it was on a table, and you have another table down below with another cup, and I did the, let me just change colors here, see, black, and I ran an insulated wire, nano-coated copper wire. It's had the plastic insulation on it. It was a multi-strand wire that was used for what do you call it, speakers and sound installations in vehicles. So it was, I think it was 8 gauge, very heavy, with many multiple strands. And I had it nano coated. It was black inside the plastic insulation, and I got it to wick like this, so it would actually drip out at the other end. And I thought, geez, maybe it would be an interesting way to purify water through the nano-coated copper grid of this wire. It would tend to pull out for sure any lead or any metal ions would be automatically taken out, as well as any positive ions that could attach to the copper oxide. So I just did a brief test of it. I was able to drain the entire cup of water into the other cup, but it took several days to do that. It was slow. But with the right configuration, maybe not quite as tight of a grid inside that tight insulation of the wire, perhaps we could have a drip system that would essentially purify water through its nanostructure.
Yeah, so have something like a siphon instead of capillary action.
Possibly, yeah. Although the capillary is interesting in terms of what we just discussed, that maybe a looser wire system, but still capillary in the way that the effect works, with the right distance between the wires and the substance, the water, to create these structures. Go ahead.
Well, when we talk about our bodies being in a plasmatic state, right? What does that mean? What are we talking about? Is it just that since we're made out of water, almost like 99% of our body is water, our bodies being in this fourth state of water, is that the plasmatic state that we're in? Because the cells, all our cells, the water in our cells is supposedly in this fourth state of water.
Right. They even mention it's because of the infrared can penetrate the skin, therefore it energizes this water into the easy water.
Yeah. And when we're sick, maybe our cells are losing this structured nature, and then we get under the sun and absorb some sun rays, we re-energize, restructure our cells, make them healthy. So when Mr. Keshe says, well, our body is in plasmatic state, what does that mean? How do we describe it? That's kind of interesting to me. Is it the same thing or is it something else? And how would you prove it? How would you show it?
Well, for example, nowhere in our body is water just, well, hardly anywhere is the water in our body exposed to the atmosphere or pressure and so on, conditions of the atmosphere. It's all inside this bag of skin. And in a way, when we take a glass of water or some other substance that has water in it, right away it's coming up against the surfaces inside our body, our tongue and roof of the mouth and the esophagus and the stomach system and so on. It's all about the interchange with the surfaces. So you can imagine that the act of taking water inside the body automatically changes it to the GAN's form, as Mr. Keshe has told us many times. And
But how do you visualize it when you say the GAN's form? What does that mean?
well, that means a structured form similar to what we're talking about in terms of this structured water. Perhaps it would be in that was it H3O2 format that you mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's so hard to measure, you can't just measure H3O2 with most lab gear probably inside the body. Then, doctors and scientists have always assumed it's H2O, like regular old water inside the body.
Yeah, maybe when it exposes to atmosphere, it changes from 3O2 to H2O.
You mean as in as
So,
soon as you try to measure it with a scientific instrument, as
well,
the
as soon
scientists
as
do,
you
take it
get it,
out of the body and put it
yeah,
under a microscope and so on, and yep, there it is, it's
so it
water.
changes the structure. So you're not measuring the same thing.
It's right. Interesting idea. Huh.
So maybe that's the plasmatic state. Well, our blood also is called plasma, right? Our fluids inside. So maybe after all, it's the plasma and this plasma are sort of similar.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't accidental. The word plasma was named inside our blood. Maybe it's the easy water inside the blood that creates all the effects. The blood's just there to create the easy water. Pardon me?
Sorry, Sikander actually made a very good point on the chat. He said urine therapy is used in India for many diseases. It's 5,000-year-old therapy. So I kind of got to thinking of that when you said when the water within the system, the structure of the body, then comes into contact with the atmosphere, and then it changes, or does it change? Because if urine therapy is beneficial, then perhaps that a lot of that structure is still retained, and we're just not able to detect it as the plasma GANs.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, could very well be. These salts and everything extra that the body doesn't need and excretes, it's probably still in the GAN state. So well, after a while, it sort of breaks down and creates ammonia.
But before it
But
breaks down,
until,
it can still have certain
yeah,
textures and colors and
yeah,
so on. And
yeah, within a certain time period, it may still be in that state. So if you can use it as soon as you get it, maybe that's most potent, time.
definitely it breaks down over time. I read something about that at one point, that there's a breakdown process there. And I know that an Eastern doctor that knows what they're doing can diagnose through urine and can tell all kinds of things about the person just from an examination like that.
Yeah, it tastes really bitter though. I guess very alkaline. Would be very alkaline, I would think. Well,
Yeah.
actually, it's supposed to be pH neutral initially, right? But then over time, it becomes very alkaline because of ammonia.
Okay.
But it has a bitter taste, though. It would be the minerals in there. So,
Yes.
pretty interesting subject, and that's why I kind of raised it up and to get a discussion going, get some ideas bouncing around.
Leith, you actually made a very good point there in chat. Would you like to open your microphone and expand upon what you've written?
Hey there, can you hear me okay? I've got some music in the background. I'll try and turn it down. Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt there because it's a very interesting topic. The other night I had a vision of that same drawing you had on the board here, that hexagonal structure of water, a transparent film or like a blanket, and it was positioned underneath like a white glowing pyramid. And I've been thinking about it for the past 2 or 3 days. What's the correlation? And it got me on this sort of research right now. And I just posted a couple links that I've had on my web browser for the past couple of days. And it's to do with the purpose of water in relation to the pyramid structures and why they had water so close to the pyramids. And as you can see, the theories, of course, it's all theory, is they use the water and created a pump system from the chambers underneath because they wanted to trap the crystal structure of water. And then people are also talking about the reasons for it is because of the platonic structures required, fire, earth, water, and those are the shapes and elements that are required in order to travel through ether. So that's the theories where I've been going with this. So what I've done is I've placed water bottles, of course, next to my MagRav units. But the messages it's getting to me is to get some sort of limestone or calcium carbonate rocks and place it underneath and pour the water into those rocks. But I have yet to do that. So that's what I'd like to share.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I think with any, let's say, impurities, any other elements you put in the water, it's going to change the structure, just like alloy metals. So depending what kind of a structure you want, for what you want it for, what energies you want to absorb and stuff, you could fine tune and sort of formulate the proper water composition to get the structure you want.
Yeah, I think it needs it as a base for a certain purpose, and it wants to evaporate the water and then mix with the plasma that you're creating to have the full combination array of elements. That's my thoughts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, although then if it has the filtering effect, then it would probably push away the other materials in there. There's also that component. as far as this easy water goes. It has a filtering effect, so it tries to purify the water within that zone. So I guess the idea that it would create other structures with the other elements in it may not hold true. Although, I mean, we're thinking about the portion of the water within this zone that is liquid crystalline, and it's purely sort of hydrogen and oxygen structures, and it has a negative charge. The other portion outside of this zone has a positive charge. So it has a certain maybe structure to it as well that we're not considering. Maybe, I don't know. It would be like the other half of the battery. And depending what elements and compounds you have in there, that would create the structure of the other half of that water battery. So both parts may have equal importance within the totality of the thing.
I wonder what would happen in terms of, like, for example, let me just draw it here is probably the best way. If we have a nano-coated copper plate, for example, and what would be, this is normally negative charge, the way I understand it, or is a draw for negative?
Well, let me make a quick comment, Rick. It was also saying that this occurs on hydrophilic surfaces. So if you need to have maybe a hydrophilic surface, water-loving surface for this to happen, maybe the water has to come real close to the surface. So maybe that has something to do with the nano-coating. Maybe the nano-coating creates a hydrophilic surface. Sorry to interrupt. Maybe, I thought.
Well, my point was going to be that if it's a negatively charged, like this, in between, this easy water is negatively charged, right? The stuff that's in between the layers. Would the water that's next to here on this plate, would it be negatively charged? I should have, let me just, oh, I can't undo. I just wanted to make it a different color so I could, oh, there it goes. So with the water that's next to the surface here, would that be easy water? Because if it's negatively charged, it would be repelled by a negative plate, you would think. Or maybe it's, I don't know if the plate's actually negatively charged in that sense. Normally that's the negative electrode. If you were to charge it and have the other plate as, if this was zinc, for example, it would be the plus normally. And if you had a battery set up in there. So, so I'm wondering if that easy surface would tend to stick to our copper, or would it be repelled by it?
Well, if you polarized it with the external voltage source, you could push it away. And as you push it away, maybe a new layer might try to form, and so you could.
That's what I was wondering. Then all of a sudden, you're creating this easy water inside you.
Yep, could be. Yeah, I'm thinking of the colloidal silver that you make is a sort of a colloidal is this liquid crystal solution. So the benefits that you're getting, maybe some of the benefits from a colloidal silver is due to the water component itself too, not just the silver ions in there.
Yeah, interesting. So the silver acts as a filler, basically, to create the water.
Yeah, it's like the alloy, makes an alloy of this water.
Yeah.
Just want to make a point. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
Okay, basically, distilled water is negatively charged. It acts like a magnet. Even when you drink it, it basically attracts all kinds of viruses, funguses, and bacteria in your body.
Yep.
So I don't know if that helps in any way in what you're talking, but this is the point I just wanted to make it. And also P, your P acts like a plasma. When a child is when a baby is in mother's uterus, I guess, uh, your P acts like a plasma to build all kinds of tissues. So I don't know if somebody can try making P as a plasma and using it in any kind of systems.
Yeah, it heard somebody tried that. I always thought about that, using urine as a making a GANs of the urine or something and seeing what that would do. I think someone told me that somebody has tried that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what they did with it, if they used it as a with the zinc and copper plate, or they used the sodium hydroxide drops to create the GANs of it at that point. But I don't know. It would be interesting to see what results you get. Yeah, it's I don't know, it's so very interesting to me. With us being human body being 99% water. Water is the biggest component that has the biggest effect on everything going on in our body. Well, I think this Dr. Pollock, he mentioned it in his thing. He said it's like 7/8 water, but when you calculate the total volume, the mass of the water, it comes out to like 99%. Yeah. Mm. I think maybe he referred to if you take all the oxygen and hydrogen maybe in your body trapped in other other components, it came out to like 99%. It's in one of his videos. Yeah, I think he was saying if you calculate something or other, it comes out to 99%. I don't know, it's in one of his videos, but it's quite a bit. So I don't know, our brains being a lot of water in our brains, in all our tissues, and water also possibly having the memory and charges associated with it, so you can transfer charges, maybe communication within cells, this, that. It becomes very interesting. Well, I don't know if you guys want to move to another subject.
It's just wondering about how doing this dry fasting thing would affect the water, or the GANs water within us, or the easy water, if that's indeed what it is. How would dry fasting affect that, where you go without water for an extended period of time, days, even up to a week or two?
Dehydration? You want to go?
Well, essentially, yeah. No food and no water is what they call dry fasting.
Well, actually, I can tell you what happened to my mom with slight dehydration. A couple of days ago, she had a sort of like, what do you call it?
Seizure?
Seizure type of a thing, right? So she went to the seizure. We took her to emergency room. They thought she had a minor stroke or something.
Uh-huh.
But after they hydrated her, she came back to normal. So I think that's one of the things that's gonna happen.
Well, Gino was telling us his experiences of going, I believe it was 12 days, 12 or 14 days, 12 days I think it was, without water and no food. And he had quite a religious experience out of it, you might say. It was transforming in terms of clarity of mind and so on. He was very dry. That was the main downside, is very dry mouth and so on. But apparently it does tend to purify the body, and a lot of toxic things come out during that time. So I'm wondering if that is a purification of that easy water, GANs water, whatever you'd like to call it, inside our body. Essentially, the body just hangs on to the good stuff and gets rid of the crap under that stress.
Maybe.
I see Guy mentions in the chat, maybe it was Diver Dan who was doing the urine GANs experiments. I think it was, actually. Thank you, Guy. So how would one test for this kind of stuff? How do you test for easy water? How do you test for how did they find out? How did the scientists find out originally, and never did discover that?
Dr. Pollock, I think he was saying it's nothing new. They were talking about this maybe like early last century. He was just able to demonstrate it better. But the way they did, they had a camera, seemed like that there was maybe like a microscope, under a microscope, that they could show this zone growing under the light source. So it was very visible. So you can see it. I'm assuming you can see it under a microscope at certain magnification. And one of their undergraduate students that was working on a project accidentally shined some light on it with a flashlight or something, and they could see that zone grow wherever the light was shining, and when it was removed, the zone pulled back. So I think you can do it visually, and they also were able to put some probes in the negative zone and the positive zone and measure
Right.
millivolts.
Probably measure the
And the
pH as well.
millivolts that they got seemed within the range that we're measuring, in the like 10 to hundreds, like maybe hundreds, couple of hundreds millivolts range.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if that's what we're measuring.
I mean the difference between the two layers, essentially.
Yeah, this easy layer and the rest of the water where it's positive.
So we have easy nanocopper and regular nanocopper layers that we're measuring between, perhaps. Is there a difference that way in the nano, the way it? Can we look at our nano layering on a copper plate, for example, in terms of this easy water? And would the first few layers have more of a negative charge, and the outer layers have a more positive charge, for example? And that would give that variance that comes up.
Mm-hmm. You're thinking just the copper, nano-coated copper layers?
Yeah,
The charge difference?
if you have, for example, 30,000 layers, and if you had 30,000 layers of water, then only some of those layers would be the easy water next to a surface, say.
Mm-hmm.
And on the copper, do we get that as well? Do the first few layers have a certain charge and the outer layers have a different charge? And that's the variance that we get because our probes are naturally going between different layers and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when they use the nano-coated copper as solar cells, I think they're relying on that effect, the potential difference between the non-nano-coated and the nano-coated layer to do the current flow.
Yeah, definitely it makes sense that the copper materiality itself, the physicality part of the copper, has a different charge than the layers. So there must be a gradient there as well. It won't be just a
Yeah,
it'd be
it's
the
not
initial
uniform.
layers should be closer to the copper charge, you would think, and the outer layers should have a different charge. Makes sense. Okay, have we beat this one up enough yet, or is any other comments about that? Additional information that people can add?
Well, it was a good discussion. I think if there is something new comes up, we can discuss another time.
I was just wondering about, is this easy water, is that something that can be communicated with humans easier than regular water, so to speak?
Well, being structured like crystalline, liquid crystalline structure, it should be more of a kind of more like a laser than a flashlight.
Definitely
In
more susceptible to human interaction if it's structured, and like we know how people interact with crystals, and we know how people interact with water in general, how it's a good cleansing mechanism for not just the physicality but for spiritual things and so on. People go to rivers and to oceans in order to cleanse their emotional things.
Well, the memory of the memory of water is probably due to this effect. When you develop your snowflakes, before it becomes, the iced stage, it would probably go through this easy stage before it completely freezes. And the different shapes that you get with the snowflakes could be due to the crystalline structuring, right? So the crystalline structure of the snowflake starts before it becomes reaches that 0 degrees, the ice stage. First initially it's maybe like a liquid crystal, and then it forms into this harder crystal shape. And probably based on the environmental fields or conditions dictates the specific shape of the snowflake. Sort of imprints the memory of that moment into the structure of that snowflake.
So would that be true of the GANs as well then? Same deal?
Yeah, I would think so, because the fields at that moment in that area should affect the structuring of the GANs. I'm sure there's a lot of other interesting things in that book, so I'm going to try to get my hands on it pretty quick.
Well, it certainly makes, if we look at an area of GANs and say there was, say we had some kind of GANs and each little dot is a piece of GANs material, and we keep looking at the GANs as being the most important, but maybe it's the state of what's in between the GANs that's doing all the work.
Yeah, you remember somebody posted a microscope photos
Yeah,
of the GANs?
I've got some nano material. I don't have the GANs ones actually.
And it looked like there were like some dots with like a halo around them, or like a different layer around it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing something like that around a more of a sharper dot. It was like this field sort of around it. Maybe that's what we were seeing. Maybe it's that easy zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like when I put dots
Yeah.
on these guys, it changes the picture quite a bit.
Yeah, it was like something like that. It was like not the whole thing, but there were a few of them like that.
Doesn't leave much space in between, and therefore, if the space is at a premium, it probably introduced a different form of water just naturally from the GANs being in there.
Mm-hmm. And it's has a gelatinous feel to it, and sometimes when the GAN settles on the bottom of the container, it's kind of looks like a gelatinous substance.
Yeah, I've been assuming that's due to the GANs particles, but maybe it's due to what's in between, which is more important. The actual water itself. Interesting idea.
And in the health cups, the goal and should be to create this easy water within the health cup, right? Because
Yes.
that's what you want to drink to get the benefit of this fields that we're thinking about, talking about.
Okay, well, excuse me. This is an interesting concept now. That what about the idea of making the GANs water that we create in these cups, making sure that it is that structured water type of water? How would we guarantee it? Has the easy water people, they create water that's stored in cups that's easy water, don't they? Can it store okay, or does it change back to regular water?
I don't know. I think there are devices that they sell that supposedly creates structured water.
You would think it would have to be created on the spot, and you couldn't, ship it and that kind of thing.
I don't know. I gotta look at what's available, how it works, and if it's possible to, with maybe a microscope or somehow test for it. There must be some sort of a way to test for it, measure this easy water.
Yeah, it would change the pH, but the pH isn't a good indicator of easy water, of course.
And then we can compare it to the water we get in our health cups and see if there's any similarities. So if it turns out to be this easy water is what we're talking about as this plasmatic water, or the water in the health cup, then there would be ways to actually measure it and look for it and see it if it does the same thing. Because he was able to see it in there under the microscope, this layer. So it should be a visible, measurable thing.
That's a good point. I guess we need to do a bit more research on that. Maybe I can find out now. Well, it mentions that glacial water, glacial melt, is a perfect way to get easy water.
Yeah.
So, for
Well,
example,
I'm
what
thinking, what if the water you put in the freezer and freeze it?
Yes, exactly.
Was
That's
that?
that was my logical conclusion to this line of reasoning as well. And if you freeze it with the GANs in it, is that going to do something special?
And also, if you're putting ice in your drink, is that enhancing your drink in more ways than just cooling it down, you know?
Yes.
Any health benefits in drinking colder water? Close to, freezing.
Well, I'm interested in what about this glacial melt water? Like, when it warms up, does it refer back to the regular water? Or how long does it stay in this easy water configuration? Is it transferable, or can you put it in a bottle and transport
Well,
it?
I think I heard or read somewhere that 54 degrees was the point where it started the effect or was more pronounced, at least in maybe with water. If you mixed other things in it, maybe at room temperature, you have the same. But I remember seeing or reading the 54-degree Fahrenheit. I don't remember in what context that was.
I have a question. Uh, Remember earlier on we were talking about the rays of the sun having some sort of an effect on the structuring of the water. Would we still have that sort of a same effect when we freeze the water in a freezer, which is pretty much no hardly any light gets in, and it's pretty well shielded from the outside?
Well, it
Well,
mentioned that infrared would work as well, and there's always heat in an environment like that. But it seems like what if we froze the water out in the sunlight?
well, that's what happens to the glaciers, right? They're under the
Mm-hmm.
sun, but they're freezing. So if we put a infrared light source in the refrigerator but cool it down,
Yes, it
maybe that
sounds
would
sounds
structure it.
counterindicated, but yeah, it's essentially put a heat lamp inside your freezer. I like it. It sort of
It's,
makes sense in an odd kind of way.
but would it be just infrared, or would ultraviolet be involved as well, maybe as a catalyst?
There's two frequencies actually. One is the let me just get them up here. I was just reading about that. Let's see.
Hi, it's Lee here. Have you guys read that book, The Hidden Messages in Water, by that Japanese scientist?
I've heard about it. I've seen some videos, but I haven't read the book.
Okay, but what he takes high-speed photographs of water just as it freezes when you're trying to project certain emotions and or music or
Yeah.
various other things on the water, and you get these interesting crystals that he takes pictures of. Sort of proves that you can affect water with your thoughts and words and feelings and emotions and stuff.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Masaru Emoto.
You're right, that's the one.
Yeah. So easy water absorbs at 270 nanometers in the light absorption spectrum. And where was the other one? That was the light frequency. Then there's the infrared frequency as well. See, I should be able to find it in this PDF.
Also, the refractive index was also 10% higher. The density and the refractive index are 10% higher.
Mm-hmm.
The potential difference was 100 millivolts to 100 millivolts difference in potential between the negative and positive regions.
Seems like if you could put a bunch of those cells in series, you could amplify that quite readily. It seems to be only a matter of putting a bunch of plates close together, perhaps. Okay, any more information on that from anyone? Oh, Guy says he has the book.
All right.
Leith says put the structured energized water in a vacuum container next to the magrav and then make the right frequency vibrations for intent, and if you get a platonic solid shape within the water structure, all is good. Interesting idea. The problem comes in where if you try to put water in a vacuum container, it starts bubbling. It will boil away inside a vacuum. It'll only go down to about, I think it's around 1,000 micron or something like that with vacuum. And then it just starts bubbling away, and you can't get any more vacuum in your container until all the water is gone. However, if it was frozen, then that would make a difference as well. So maybe we need to freeze it, put it in a vacuum container, and turn the infrared light on it at the same time, all beside the magrav. And maybe that would make the platonic solid shapes within the water structure. Maybe we would see it within the ice structure, or within the possibly cooling down the structure as it was boiling off in the vacuum. That would be interesting as well. So,
yeah, this is Tony. I just wanted to add water has some really interesting properties in sunlight. As far as algae and mold go, you leave out a clear container in sunlight, get algae growth. You put it in a black container, you won't get any growth at all. So it's obviously blocking some of those aspects. And to add to that, if you just add a little bit of copper to that clear container, you won't get any mold growth at all, which we've all seen, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sort of not throwing it one way or the other. It's just a consideration. Throwing it in.
Oh, with the black container, it would absorb more infrared and get maybe transfer that to the water. I mean, would you? Well, we're assuming that more algae growth would be because of the easy water, or less than.
Oops, my mic was off.
Well, would infrared go through the container, even though the walls are black? Would the container absorb and then retransmit inside the water the infrared energy rather than having it just pass through and go the
Yeah.
other side?
Yeah, well, the infrared, anything that's above absolute zero would give off some infrared as far as heat goes. But
So
it
Well,
the
might
maybe
container.
the ultraviolet spectrum.
to grow the algae, you mean, or
Well, yeah, that may be what's being blocked by the black container. There will certainly some frequency of light is being blocked. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Well, that's true. Maybe the infrared or ultraviolet's necessary for the algae to grow, and that the
Yeah.
black blocks that rather than the infrared, which is less likely that way. Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking if it has that filtering property where it pushes everything out away from it and leaves just pure water, in that region you shouldn't be able to grow algae. It'll just
Yes,
push it
but
out.
the thing is, for life forms, what do they love to grow in is, for example, a petri dish that's supposedly completely sterile. That's where molds love to grow, is in a
On the
sterile
surfaces, right?
environment. So
They
perhaps
they
they
grow on the
thrive.
surfaces also, right? They grow right on the surface. So
Right, and the same in our body. If it's the easy water that's in our body, that's what our growth thrives on, apparently. It seems
and
like a
also,
contradiction in a way, but maybe the easy water, like the green algae inside a bottle, you put a glass bottle out in the environment in the sun for a few days and it'll start to grow the green algae on it. And it'll be on the surface. It won't be just in the liquid inside the bottle and repelled by the glass surface. It'll be actually stuck onto the glass surface and seems to love to grow on it. So maybe it's that easy water that it likes to grow on. Think of things that grow on the surface of water as well. Again, algae or other types of life forms that thrive on that few molecular layers on the surface of the water.
yeah, maybe because it has more oxygen than the bacteria that like oxygen, they would grow like what are they called? There's a name for them, right? The ones that grow in oxygen environment versus the ones that grow in
Anaerobic and
anaerobic.
Yeah.
Maybe the aerobic ones grow on the easy zone areas, and the other ones grow in the rest of the area. Maybe within the same container, you might have two types growing, maybe.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, swimming pools, you'll get a certain amount of growth on the walls, and I've seen that in bottles of water on my windowsill. It'll actually grow on the sides of the bottle and the bottom of the bottle. as against the ones that are more that will float on the top. Yeah, different.
Even at very deep levels of the ocean, where you have areas of thermal uprisings, you'll have a lot of extremophiles growing over there, and that's where GANs and the plasma state is much more readily available, because that's what is coming out of the earth. So yeah, I mean, these kind of life forms pretty much thrive anywhere, I would say.
But also in that particular instance, you've got very cold water right next to those thermal vents as well. So maybe that's where the that easy water would tend to hang out and be a perfect fertile growing ground for those same microbes when they do heat up or when they come out of the hot gases or liquids of the cracks and so on.
Yeah,
Right.
a lot of
Sort of a
infrared
Goldilocks zone.
energy.
Right.
Yeah, right. Lots of infrared
Heat.
energy. Good point.
Like those volcanic under ocean volcanic things. So maybe life started.
I was just gonna say, it sounds like a perfect homey environment to be created. You know, you've got all the important factors are there. Clean environment with this easy water, because it's important to have a clean environment when you're being created, and also at the same time have the stimulation of the infrared and possibly even ultraviolet at those levels as well. They have special, there's algae and different life forms that can emit waves and they can light up their own surroundings, for example, or be lit up in their surroundings in spite of it being a mile or two underwater, in a very, very dark environment. They've only discovered this recently, that most of the life forms can see each other down in that dark environment because they emit their own light. And they didn't try testing by recording. They had to have special cameras to record the light given off by these critters so they can see each other.
That would be interesting, you know. They would be seeing like stars floating in the darkness.
Exactly.
I had an experience in Belize many years ago with phosphorescence in the water that we've all seen or seen film of. We were catching fish out in the Belizean Keys, and we'd been gutting fish all day in the boat, baiting up, and I walked down to the boat during the night because basically we're on a coral key, and I didn't sleep very well in the coral as the native guys did. And I looked at the boat, and the whole boat was glowing green with handprints from the fish guts that obviously, it was right through the bodies and the blood of the fish. I'd never seen that before.
Could you say that again? How did that work? What were you seeing? I didn't understand.
I was talking about at that time there was a lot of phosphorescence in the water, to the point where you just kick your foot in the shallows at night, and the light, it creates a light in the phosphorescence that you can actually see your feet,
right,
and see underwater. As you're going along at night, fish will dart across in front of the boat, and you can follow their track as they zigzag away from the boat. And you look back at the wake from the outboard motor, and it goes back hundreds of meters.
Yeah, I understand that part.
Really?
What about the fingerprint or whatever you mentioned?
Well, during the day, we were gutting fish and baiting up from fish that we caught in that local area. And obviously the phosphorescence had got into the fish themselves. It was part of their bodies. And as I walked down to the boat in the dark, my eyes started to adjust, and I could see these green glowing handprints all over the boat where we'd had the blood of the fish and the bait on our hands
Oh yeah.
all over the boat. You know,
Hmm.
that was really different. Yeah.
Hmm. Guy mentions, or when you paddle at night, it is magical. Guy is the person who, well, he used to live on his boat. He doesn't currently, but he has a ship that he lives on. Paddles out to at night sometimes. Okay, what else to add to that? Coming up in the last few minutes here, I have to quit at next 5 minutes, say. Definitely we could use some more information on this realm and try to flesh it out a little more. I think we could make some correlations with the GANs to perhaps lead to some new discovery or add to the knowledge.
Yeah, well, even with the nano layers, these hexagonal layers are sort of like nano layers, crystalline.
Well, it's the
structures.
perfect depiction of graphene, for example. The two-dimensional form of graphene is that hexagonal pattern, and they have layers that slide over each other. Like graphite has layers of graphene that slide over each other, and very similar to what you have there. And we're told copper oxide also can have a similar structure, the diamond type structure. So in some cases they may be a similar structure sliding over each other essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Liquid crystal versus solid crystal structures.
Yeah, and even what we call solid are not always solid.
Yeah,
They're a growing. Crystals tend to be a growing structure. We don't think of them as growing, but you can actually like take a quartz crystal and put electricity into it and cause it to increase its dimensional size. So it's interesting that way. And on the copper oxide surface, it's always growing and it's always losing and gaining the copper oxide. You know, it's a transformational environment that's always changing.
Yeah, when the copper is underwater, or maybe when it's still wet, you have the nano layer growing on it, and I wonder if shining light on it or doing something would increase the layer thicknesses somehow. Any type of radiation or something that would act like the infrared in this case, maybe some other frequencies or some other radio frequencies could aid the thickness of the...
Yeah, we do know that putting a bit of electricity in will increase the thickness of the layers. It'll fluff them up, I think Keshe said. So other than tiny amounts might align the surface, but any more than tiny amounts of power, tiny being a few millivolts basically, will tend to fluff the nano layers, make them thicker but also more porous, or more gaps and holes in there. That's the way I understand it. And we could see that through the one thing we examined, I think it was last week or the week before, the picture of the nano layers, the microscope picture, SEM microscope pictures of the nano layers when we had diagonal and crosswise power added to it, and then compared with no power, it's definitely fluffier and more porous structure when the power was added.
Interesting. All right, this was good.
Yeah, we kind of just ran with it on what the knowledge we have, and if we had more knowledge on that, I think we could push it in a certain direction and get some actual adding to the knowledge out of it. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Just working with the concepts can sort of force the ideas that come through. It's a bit of pounding in a round peg into a square hole sort of thing. But I think there is a correlation. There must be a correlation between this easy water concept and the GANS water. There's got to be some sort of tight relationship there, if not the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, all invention has to do is with finding relationships in things that don't initially look like there's any relationships between them.
Yes, indeed. Like, for example, the consciousness of the GANs. I just saw this little guy here. He's got 2 eyes and a mouth. He's looking back at me. Who knows how many one-eyed entities are in there, but that one's got 2. So, there you go. Okay, I'm going to wrap things up here. I got some things to do before the next online teaching.
Yeah, thanks
So,
everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Rick.
thank you all for participating and coming by here. And we'll see you next week for...
Thanks for the best 2 minutes I ever got, Rick. I just got here.
Oh, sorry.
Everybody, I'm so sorry. I missed.
Well, it was...
Oh, wow.
It's
I
okay.
hope we have the recording.
There should be a recording on live stream, and we'll have another recording. I'll try to get it up on YouTube. I'm back a few weeks on the plasma teachings to get them up on YouTube, but I'll try to do that in the next while. All right.
See you guys next time.
Thank you, and thank you, Guy, for your comments there too. You were quite active in the chat. That was great. And okay, bye to everyone. That's the Wednesday, March 9th, 2016. Now Wednesday, March 9th, 2016. Keshe Plasma Reactor Group. Okay.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.